Welcome to Deep Thought, the gods of a people. Now, I talked about the spirit of a group, and I also talked about the science of archetypes. Now I'm going to talk about the gods of a people. Now, I would ask. I realize everyone has their own spiritual beliefs, but understand, regardless of how strong your faith is, everyone doesn't worship the same way. And if you were to look at the gods of any people, in a healthy people anyway, they would reflect those people. A wise person once said that religion is the institutionalized culture of a people. The gods of a people will always represent them. And of course, in most traditions, it was the gods who created a people. But was it that way, or the people created the gods? Because as I said, I'm someone who's actually studied religion. That's why I'm open, and that's why, for the most part, I'm tolerant of people's beliefs. The only time I'm intolerant is when someone feels like their way is the only way. That's the only time, and I'll state that. Everyone has their path, and ultimately a path is between that person and everyone else. The imperialistic religions believe otherwise, but that's another conversation. But if you look at the personalities of the deities of different religions, ultimately it represents their worldview, their culture, the way they do things. The question is it did the chicken come before the egg, or the egg became before the chicken? Because think about it. And because that's why, and even then, you'll find in most cultures, if you study their religion, a lot of times what happens is it will evolve with whatever's going on. And this might be tough to hear, but for example, two Abrahamic religions, Christianity and Islam, they've actually evolved from what actually started. They've actually evolved, and that always in a good way. That's why you have so many sects in both religions, because as they reach the people, they would evolve. A show that I mentioned, I mentioned it and I said I wasn't going to get into it until this episode, American Gods. Where they, the storyline is you have the old gods of the people from Europe and Africa and the Middle East at war with the new gods of America. And the old gods represented different things. Now, they also evolved with the times. For example, one of the old gods was Anansi. Now, somebody had to correct me. I kept saying Anansi, but it's Anansi. And, that's the trickster god. And there was an episode they showed him in his true form. But, as he evolved, as the people evolved, they changed. His form had to change, too. So he was represented as, a brother, a natty dressed brother. In fact, he was a tailor. He had his hair, conked out, natty dressed, but he still had the same thing. But was that a reflection of that God, of a God that would stay the same, or the evolution? It would evolve. Like for those familiar with the Manosphere of the Asar Set Society, I remember talking with a friend, and we was talking about the different deities represented on the Kemetic Tree of Life as presented by Asar Set. Notice I say as presented. Other groups might have a different take. And we were talking about how different deities would be presented. For example, Heru might be presented as that suit and tie brother, like running stuff, if we modernized it. Heru would be, that fine, Het Heru would be that fine IG type of sister, Tahuti would be that older scholarly brother. Her Kahuti would be that brother with the tank top and the Timbs. But then that would be a reflection of the culture. Even in something like Christianity, I remember an episode of American Gods had Jesus. Several of them. Several of them. And one of the characters, the character Odin, was like, oh, yeah, that's because each culture has a different version of Jesus. So always remember that. That's the lens. That's the lens we will always see ID, because ultimately, how a person sees their creator would always reflect them. That's why I say it's unhealthy. It's actually unhealthy when someone, and I say it in most cases, I'm good with however a person worships deity, but sometimes you have to think about it. Is this the deity that represents your real bloodline or your culture? It would have to change. Like, even in the Christian churches today, maybe a lot of stuff would have to change just because of the circumstances. Maybe there needs to be more of a discussion on finances, more emphasis on that. Or even certain foods. It was like, many of the things that are in the Bible about don't eat this or that, especially in the Old Testament, had a cultural context. You got to say what's going on now. And then, I use those examples, but then using an example again from American Gods, the new gods were the technology. That's become like a god to people. People worship at the altar of that smartphone. People give more attention to it. People can't live with it. Like, you can actually probably cause serious emotional and physical distress if you take somebody's cell phone. Think about it. And shoot, yet another god in there, media. We worshiping that media, or the world. I mean, whatever. They actually had money in there. There's a god. It's God. Money was a god in there. It's the energy. What do people worship? What is a reflection of their personality? I've joked with people before about what I call the player god. I say, yeah, the player gods are mad. Yeah, they're going to decide they want to cut the grass outside my place now. But, I talk about that, and I said, because if you look at the archetypes, and you got a bunch of people who feel in a certain way, that energy actually goes into the ethers. It actually creates a sort of collective consciousness. And there's actually, that's part of the science for those who understand how the deities work in African traditional sciences. I ain't gonna get into it now. Spook some people who are not aware of it. But that energy, that energy, like, let me use the meta example again, the tree of life, Sebek. That's the energy that created the internet. In fact, somebody possessed Sebek at a ritual, and they said, I created it. Sebek came and said, I created the internet. Some people going to get that, some people ain't. But, that's always important. It's always important. And in fact, one of the evil things that's done is when someone imposes their view on another culture, or they think it's wrong because it don't match theirs, or say the gods of their culture are evil because it doesn't match that. No, it's always about the culture. It's about the people. Like, another point that was in American Gods is the old gods were ready to go to war because they weren't getting worshipers. So the people had, it is a kind of metaphor. You can't take it literally, but, is that God or that deity still there if people don't worship and don't acknowledge it? Now, personally, I would say it's there, but it's not giving it energy. It's a lot. See, understand, at the end of the day, everything's connected. Now, I know that was probably, I probably went through some stuff. Anybody who's an advanced student of especially metaphysics know I left a lot out. I threw some stuff out there, but that's what I do on this channel. So anyway, that's all I got for today. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace and many blessings.